There is a village in Japan where nobody gets diabetes. Not low rates, not well-managed cases, not a lucky handful who beat the odds. Zero. For over 4 centuries, the people there had no word for diabetes at all. They simply did not need one. When researchers finally arrived in 9,970 and tested every willing resident, they came back with nothing. Not a single case in the entire population. In a community where most adults lived comfortably past 80 and many reached 100, fasting blood sugar readings look like numbers you would expect from a healthy person in their 20s. Here's what stopped me cold when I first found this. It was not a rare genetic mutation. It was not some exotic plant nobody outside the village had heard of. It was not a rigorous exercise program. It came down to one specific way of eating. A meal pattern so ordinary looking on the surface that Western researchers almost moved right past it when they first documented it. Almost. But when you understand what this pattern does inside your body at the cellular level, specifically what it does to 2 biological systems called AMPK and mTOR, you start to see why this information has never entered the mainstream conversation about diabetes prevention in this country. That is exactly what we are unpacking today. The village is called Ogimi. It sits on the northwestern edge of Okinawa, the southernmost island chain in Japan. Population just over 3,000 people. You could drive through in 4 minutes. No hospital, no urgent care. There is a small general store selling vegetables and seaweed that locals have always called longevity food. And this quiet, unremarkable-looking place has more people over 100 years old per capita than anywhere else on Earth. 15 centenarians in a community of 3,000. Over 170 residents in their 90s. Take a moment and let that sink in. If this channel has given you anything worth knowing, subscribe right now. Not for me, for you. We are building a place where people over 65 get honest, real information. Drop a comment below while you are at it. Just 3 words. I want answers. Let me see how many of us are out here. I already know what is running through your mind right now because it ran through mine too. You are thinking, maybe these people just won the genetic lottery. Maybe they were born with something built into their biology that the rest of us simply do not have. That is completely reasonable to wonder about, and the answer turns out to be one of the most important parts of the entire story. After World War II, something changed on Okinawa. The younger generation drifted away from the traditional food their families had eaten for generations. Western-style eating moved in. Processed food became widely available. And within a single generation, the island that had recorded the lowest obesity rates in all of Japan was suddenly posting the highest. Type 2 diabetes cases climbed sharply. Cardiovascular deaths increased. Chronic illness that had been practically invisible in villages like Ogimi started appearing across the island at rates matching the rest of the developed world. Same genetic pool, same island, same water. The only variable that shifted was what ended up on their plates. Professor Craig Wilcox, who spent years studying aging at Okinawa International University, put a number to it directly. He found that approximately 2/3 of the longevity advantage these centenarians carried came from diet and daily lifestyle practices. Genetics contributed roughly 1/3, and that piece mostly mattered only for people pushing past 100 years old. For the average person, what and how they ate was doing the meaningful work by a wide margin. That means whatever kept a small village on a Japanese island free of diabetes for 4 centuries was not something sealed inside their DNA and unavailable to the rest of us. It was a repeatable set of daily choices, a way of preparing and eating food passed quietly from one generation to the next, never analyzed in a laboratory, never written in a health manual until someone finally looked closely enough to pay attention. That is what we are going to walk through right now. Component 1. Sweet potato instead of white rice. Here is something most people outside Japan have never heard. While the rest of the country built daily meals around white rice, the people of Ogimi built theirs around sweet potatoes, not regular potatoes, specifically purple and orange-fleshed varieties that grew natively on the island, which locals called imo. For most of Ogimi's recorded history, these root vegetables made up 60 to 70% of total daily calories. 60 to 70% from a single food. To understand why that substitution matters, you need to understand what happens in your body every time you eat white rice. White rice carries a glycemic index somewhere between 73 and 89, depending on variety and preparation. That number means its starch breaks apart quickly during digestion. Blood sugar climbs fast. Your pancreas releases a surge of insulin in response. And when that cycle repeats at meal after meal across decades, the whole system gradually wears thin. Insulin receptors lose their ability to respond properly. That slow, silent wearing down is exactly how type 2 diabetes develops, not suddenly, quietly, over a very long time. Sweet potatoes are a different story. Their glycemic index typically sits around 54. The purple varieties of Ogimi test even lower, sometimes into the mid-40s. That gap between 40-something and 80 is not a technical footnote. It means blood sugar climbs gradually rather than spiking sharply. Your pancreas is not being called to respond urgently at every sitting. Multiply that gentler curve across a lifetime of daily meals, and the cumulative difference becomes something significant. But the glycemic index is only half of what makes these particular sweet potatoes effective. The purple flesh contains compounds called anthocyanins, the same pigments creating that deep purple color you see when you cut one open. White rice contains none of them. Research published in 2024 Chol, a peer-reviewed journal under Cell Press, found that anthocyanins from purple sweet potatoes did not simply lower blood sugar in diabetic subjects. They normalized it, bringing fasting glucose from clearly diabetic ranges back toward normal. And they did it within 10 days, primarily by restoring populations of beneficial gut bacteria that a poor diet had wiped out. A study conducted in Finland gave healthy adult men an anthocyanin-rich extract from purple potatoes alongside a standard meal. Compared to a control group, their blood sugar and insulin levels rose meaningfully less in the hours that followed. The mechanism is specific. Anthocyanins slow two digestive enzymes called alpha-amylase and alpha-glucosidase, precisely the enzymes your small intestine uses to convert complex starch into simple sugars entering your bloodstream. When those enzymes run at full speed, glucose floods in all at once. When anthocyanins reduce their activity, the conversion slows. Sugar enters the blood gradually. The pancreas responds at a reasonable pace. Insulin receptors are not being overwhelmed at every meal. The people of Ogimi were achieving all of this every day for 400 years without knowing any of those scientific names. They just knew it was what their grandparents had always eaten. Component 2. Soy-based protein instead of red meat. Picture a traditional plate of food in Ogimi because it looks nothing like what the average American eats 3 times a day. The rough breakdown, approximately 85% plant-based carbohydrates, around 9% protein, and about 6% fat. That protein percentage sounds low. Stay with me here, because the source and character of that protein is where the important details lie. Nearly all daily protein came from 2 places, soy and fish. Tofu appeared at meals almost every day. Miso soup was a constant. Edamame and fermented soy preparations were common throughout the week. Small, locally caught fish rounded out the animal protein. Red meat was genuinely rare. Pork was eaten during festivals, not daily. A long-running Japanese research project called the JACC study followed more than 21,000 adults between ages 40 and 79 over many years. One of the clearest findings involves soy. Women who ate tofu on a near-daily basis showed a 33% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to women who ate it infrequently, 33%. That is a clinically meaningful difference, and it came from food, not from a pill. The mechanism involves naturally occurring compounds in soy called isoflavones, particularly 2 of them known as genistein and didesign. These compounds interact directly with insulin receptors, the molecular docking sites on the surface of your cells that allow insulin to deliver glucose inside where it can be used for energy. Here is a useful way to picture it. Think of insulin as a key designed to open a specific lock. The lock is your cell's insulin receptor. Type 2 diabetes develops in significant part because that lock gets damaged and stiff over time, stuck in a position where the key no longer turns properly. Insulin arrives to do its job, but the receptor barely responds anymore. Glucose stays in the bloodstream instead of getting into cells. Soy isoflavones appear to function like a cleaning agent for that stuck lock. They help restore the receptor's sensitivity, returning some of the responsiveness that years of metabolic stress have progressively worn away. There is a deeper molecular connection between this and the first component, But to see it clearly, you need to understand the third piece first. Component 3, Hara Hachi Bu, the 80% rule. Before every meal, the people of Ogimi remind themselves of a short phrase from a Confucian teaching roughly 2,500 years old. Hara Hachi Bu, eat until you are 80% full. Not until you feel satisfied. Not until you feel stuffed. Stop at 80%, at the point where you could still eat more but deliberately choose not to. Every meal, every day, for your whole life. Researchers at the Okinawa Research Center for Longevity Science actually quantified what this daily practice produces. They found that traditional Okinawans consumed somewhere between 10 and 15% fewer calories each day than standard nutritional recommendations for their age and activity level. Not dramatically less food. Not anything near deprivation, just a consistent, moderate gap, repeated day after day across an entire lifetime. And that modest gap activates something inside your cells that most people will never hear about in a routine medical appointment. Inside every cell in your body, there is a molecular switch researchers call AMPK, short for adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. Think of it as your cell's internal fuel sensor. When energy is plentiful, when you have just finished a large meal and glucose is flowing through your system, AMPK sits quiet and lets a different system take the lead. That other system is called mTOR, short for mechanistic target of rapamycin. mTOR's primary function is growth. Cell growth, fat storage, protein synthesis, building. Your body genuinely needs mTOR. The problem develops when it runs nearly continuously because your cells almost never spend time in any meaningful energy deficit state. When mTOR stays chronically overactive, three specific things happen that directly push your body toward type 2 diabetes. First, insulin receptors gradually become less sensitive, meaning cells progressively lose their ability to hear insulin's signal. Second, mTOR promotes fat accumulation around your internal organs, and that visceral fat drives a cycle of inflammation that makes insulin resistance steadily worse. Third, mTOR suppresses autophagy, your body's built-in cellular maintenance process that identifies and removes damaged proteins and malfunctioning cellular components. When autophagy shuts down, cellular debris accumulates and metabolic systems begin failing from within. Research in the journal Diabetes established that AMPK activation is the essential mechanism through which caloric restriction improves insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue. When scientists knocked out the AMPK gene in their test subjects, every blood sugar benefit associated with eating less vanished entirely. The switch was not just one helpful factor, it was the whole mechanism. Here is what consistent Hara Hachi Bu produces at the cellular level. When you stop at 80% day after day, your cells spend meaningful time in a mild energy deficit state. Not starving, not deprived, just slightly below fully topped off. That modest gap wakes AMPK up. Activated AMPK does the opposite of everything chronically active mTOR does. It improves insulin receptor sensitivity. It shifts your metabolism toward burning stored fat rather than accumulating more. It restores autophagy, clearing accumulated cellular damage. It reduces chronic systemic inflammation. And it activates a gene called phoxodry that longevity researchers associate with extended healthy lifespan. Centenarians in Ogimi carry active phoxodry at significantly higher rates than the general population. Now let the complete picture come together. Sweet potatoes prevent the blood sugar spikes that push mTOR into overdrive at every meal. Soy isoflavones directly repair the insulin receptors that metabolic stress has worn down. Hara Hachi Bu creates the consistent daily caloric gap that keeps AMPK engaged and keeps mTOR from running permanently. Three components working together every meal, every day for 400 years. No prescriptions, no injections, just food eaten with intention. I want to be deliberate about how I frame what comes next. I am not making accusations I cannot back up with documented facts. What I am going to do is lay out exactly what the record shows and let you reach your own conclusions. The American Diabetes Association is among the most influential health organizations in the United States. The dietary guidelines your doctor references, the research priorities that determine which questions get studied and which get passed over, the information that ends up in medical school curricula, all of it is shaped significantly by what the ADA chooses to endorse and fund. Here is what the record shows. The ADA has never commissioned a single randomized clinical trial specifically examining the traditional Okinawan meal pattern. Not one trial on Hara Hachi Bu as a dietary intervention. Not one trial on purple sweet potato consumption for blood sugar management. Not one trial testing the combination of low glycemic load, moderate daily caloric restriction, and soy protein working in concert the way they do in Ogimi. Not once. Now look at what has received funding. Metformin, GLP-1's receptor agonist medications, SGLT2 inhibitors, continuous glucose monitoring devices, bariatric surgery, pharmaceutical and medical device interventions that cost on average between $300 and $1,200 per patient every single month. The Okinawan meal pattern costs roughly $2 to $4 a day. Sweet potatoes and tofu are available at any regular American grocery store. There is no patent on a sweet potato. There is no licensing structure around eating until 80% full. No pharmaceutical manufacturer collects revenue when a doctor suggests replacing refined starches with purple sweet potato. No device company sells anything when a centuries-old meal philosophy stabilizes blood sugar effectively. The supporting research already exists. The Okinawa Centenarian Study has been collecting data since 1975. More than 1,000 centenarians have been examined. Findings appear in peer-reviewed journals with public citations anyone can look up. That evidence is there. It is simply not being amplified by organizations with the resources to make it part of what doctors discuss with patients. I am not suggesting anyone abandon their medication without talking to their physician first. What I am saying is that a meal pattern producing 0 cases of diabetes across an entire community for 4 centuries deserves more than silence. If you agree, type "study the food" in the comments. You do not live in Okinawa. You cannot source heritage sweet potato varieties from a local island farm. You are not reciting ancient phrases before dinner. I understand that. What I want to do right now is translate everything we have covered into 3 concrete shifts you can make this week, using foods available at any ordinary American grocery store. Shift 1. Replace 1 starch per day with sweet potato. Start with a single meal. If you currently eat white rice, white bread, or pasta at dinner, replace it with a boiled or steamed sweet potato. Orange-fleshed varieties are easy to find and represent a genuine improvement over refined starches. If you can locate purple-fleshed varieties at an Asian grocery store, the anthocyanin concentration is higher, and that is what the research specifically points to. But orange is a real upgrade regardless. How you cook it matters. Boiling or steaming keeps the glycemic impact lower. Baking converts more complex starch into simple sugars before the food even reaches your mouth. When you have the option, boil or steam. Here is something the research supports that most people overlook. Cook your sweet potato, then refrigerate it overnight before eating. When cooked starch cools slowly, a portion converts into resistant starch, which passes through your small intestine without being broken down into glucose. Instead, it feeds beneficial bacteria in your large intestine. Same food, same calories, a meaningfully different metabolic effect, just from letting it cool overnight. Shift 2. Add 1 soy food each day. This shift asks you to add rather than replace 1 serving of tofu, a cup of miso soup, or half a cup of edamame. Choose the one you will actually eat consistently, because regularity matters more than selecting the optimal option. The JACC study found the strongest association with near-daily tofu, but any whole soy food delivers the isoflavones that support insulin receptor function. The key word is whole, not soy protein isolate, not protein bars with soy listed somewhere among 15 ingredients. Simple tofu, miso dissolved in hot water, edamame lightly salted. One note, if you take thyroid medication, soy can affect absorption when taken at the same time. Separate them by at least 2 hours and confirm specifics with your doctor. This is manageable, not a reason to avoid whole soy foods. Shift 3. Practice the 80% rule. This is the hardest of the 3. The difficulty is not technical, it is behavioral. You are working against a habit reinforced since childhood. Most of us were taught to eat until full. Stopping at 80% while you could comfortably eat more requires working deliberately against that conditioning. 3 techniques that help. Put your fork down between each bite. It takes approximately 20 minutes from when you start eating for your brain to register the fullness signals your stomach is already sending. Eat a meal in 8 minutes and you have already overshot before your brain caught up. Use a smaller plate. Research consistently finds that plate size influences how much people serve and consume, largely below the level of conscious awareness. After you feel you have probably eaten enough, wait 10 minutes before deciding whether to take more. Most of the time, the urge fades completely in those 10 minutes. You are not going hungry. You are creating the same mild caloric gap that activated AMPK in the people of Ogimi, the gap that kept an entire village free of type 2 diabetes for 4 centuries. Before you apply any of this, let me walk you through 4 mistakes people commonly make when adopting this pattern. Some look harmless, a few will cancel the benefits entirely. Mistake 1. Adding sweeteners to your sweet potato. You prepare a sweet potato, which is a good start. Then you pour brown sugar, honey, or maple syrup on top. You have just eliminated the primary reason for switching. Your pancreas does not interpret sugar differently based on the wholesome food it arrived on. A blood sugar spike triggered by sweetener on top of a vegetable is still a blood sugar spike. The people of Ogimi ate their sweet potatoes steamed and plain, occasionally with a little miso or turmeric. If you need flavor, cinnamon is worth trying since some research links it to modest improvements in insulin sensitivity. But the moment sweetener enters the picture, the glycemic benefit gets disrupted. Mistake 2. Stopping at 80% at meals but grazing between them. The entire point of the caloric gap is that your cells spend meaningful time in a lower energy state where AMPK activates and mTOR steps down. Snacking on crackers or granola bars between meals keeps mTOR running continuously. AMPK never gets the space to engage. If you genuinely need something between meals, green tea is a useful bridge. It contains EGCG, a compound providing mild AMPK support and modest blood sugar benefits without breaking the mechanism. Mistake 3. Taking calcium supplements at the same time as your soy food. Some research suggests that high concentrations of calcium in the digestive tract compete with absorption of soy isoflavones. Taking a calcium supplement alongside your daily soy food may reduce how much isoflavone your body actually absorbs. The fix is simple. Separate them by at least 2 to 3 hours. You lose nothing. You just space them out so both can work as intended. Mistake 4. Expecting results within a week. The people of Ogimi practice this across entire lifetimes. The benefits, meaning AMPK activation, restored insulin receptor sensitivity, and reduced inflammation, are cumulative. They build over weeks, months, and years. Give yourself a minimum of 90 days before making any real assessment of change in blood sugar markers. That aligns with the lifespan of a red blood cell, which is precisely what your HbA1c test measures. Consistency over time is the whole mechanism. In Ogimi, there is a stone marker, old and weathered, carved with characters translating to something like this. At 80 years old, you are still just a young person. At 90, if your ancestors invite you to join them in heaven, tell them to wait until you reach 100. Then you might consider it. That is not decorative. That is the genuine worldview of people who live there, because an Ogimi reaching 100 is not treated as extraordinary. It is simply what is expected. And the foundation beneath that expectation is one meal pattern practiced without interruption for generations. Sweet potatoes instead of refined starches, soy-based protein in place of daily red meat, the practice discipline of stepping back from the table while you could still eat more. No patent required, no prescription needed, no monthly insurance authorization, just food. Prepared simply, eaten with awareness, for 400 years. The American Diabetes Association may never fund the study. Your doctor may never mention it in an appointment, but you know it now, and genuine knowledge is the one thing nobody can charge you for. If this changed the way you think about food and blood sugar, share it with someone you care about, particularly someone over 65 who deserves honest information. The people who profit from managing chronic conditions over the long term are not going to share this for you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for trusting this channel with your time.